Hello everyone, I'm Paul Santilli with SCIP, Strategic Consortium of Intelligence Professionals here at Intellicon Nashville 2024. And I'm here with my good friend, Richard Klavans. He's the CEO and founder of SciTech Strategies. Dick, welcome very much to Intellicon.
Welcome, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So tell me, what does SciTech Strategies do and what is your role there?
Well, SciTech Strategy has been involved for the last, 30, 40 years with trying to crack a very difficult research problem, which is predicting emerging areas of research at scale and with a degree of accuracy, forecast accuracy, that makes it useful for both intelligence professionals and, of course, in applications. Doing it for a long time.
So is this both an academic and enterprise practitioner space?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that. So when you're an academic, so I'm a researcher, and when I was doing my dissertation, I had a choice. You either go the academic route, which is 30% of your time you can do research, or you set up your own lab, which means you can do 80% of the time doing research if you can get it funding. I chose the second because I came from a more entrepreneurial family. So there was a particular research problem I was interested in being involved in, and it had to do with essentially big data, what was called big data at the time. And that's what got me enthralled with it. And I gave a presentation at SCIP, got a number of clients from that, and that helped fund the research efforts for quite a long time.
Excellent. So you mentioned SCIP here. I know you have a long affiliation in the past with SCIP. I don't want to say how many years. I'll let you say that.
I can't even remember, but I do know it goes back probably about 1990. Because when I was trying to test this idea out, I was curious if there was any actual users. I was doing a PhD in strategic management, and I want to see, is this going to be useful for strategy? And so I went to a SCIP conference and gave a presentation and got a couple of clients right away. And it was the involvement of a lot of the lead users at SCIP that really helped the early development of this research. And after that, other things happened, but SCIP was really instrumental in helping me accomplish some interesting outcomes from developing new ways of predicting emergence.
So I'm very pleased that you're back at SCIP after such a long hiatus. I know it was you had many things to do in your own organization, but now you're back at SCIP, and very anxious to continue the partnership going forward. What are some of the major areas you're seeing as some of the challenges in the research that you're doing? I mean, what are more of the areas that are being of interest right now in both the academic and the enterprise space? Those kinds of areas that it might be most requested.
Actually, I liked that presentation that Richard Spears did this morning because I think he identified very well some of the emerging opportunities. The one I think he might not have had mentioned, especially that's very relevant in the United States right now, is the upcoming competition with China.
Of course.
And what that means. And that's a really, that worries me because of just the way that's unfolding.
Yeah, well, especially, I mean, this conference, the Intellicon conference we're having today, this week, is all around AI and the intelligence space of the intelligence ecosystem. So the whole concept of AI, again, China is very much, in some ways, leading us in that category and investing heavily in the AI space. And how does that AI application, that whole landscape play out in a lot of the intelligence development that we're doing, as well as the CEOs of today in the enterprise space really embracing the AI technology as a tool by which they can help with their strategy and growth. And that's becoming a challenge. So I would imagine the sort of research that we're trying to do is to help with the accuracy and the credibility of the AI algorithms so that the confidence levels in organizations are built up much higher so that CEOs feel more confident in predicting the future.
I think it's, I agree with that. Also the comments this morning is that in many of the cases, it's not just in AI, but AI applied to technical intelligence. They're way ahead of us, and not necessarily maybe in developing the best solution, but in applying it. And I have no evidence of that, but I have indirect evidence that in terms of the areas that they fund now, they're doing a darn better job than we are picking the emerging areas to put basic research dollars in.
So I know militarily is one of the major areas that they're
the whole government is interested in that, but it's not just the military, because this is basically economic growth and jobs, and people don't have jobs, we're not happy.
Right.
You know, bread and circus.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the shadow of what happened many years ago with Japan, when they essentially were much more effective at automation and taking over the auto industry.
Right.
And the American executives' heads were in the sand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was involved in analysis back
those days
then.
as
Remember
well.
those days?
I remember those days.
And we didn't listen, you know, we haven't learned a lesson from that. And my assessment is they're much more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And but regardless of that, being here in the States, we've gotten a lot of support from the intelligence community. And how can you actually have something that is useful for executives?
Right.
That's pretty much the space that I stay in. And we're a small research lab. There's only 3 or 4 of us.
Yeah.
So it's nothing big.
But still, there's quite a lot of value that can come out of 3 or 4 minds that are working together, right?
Well, yes.
You've got a ton of experience in this environment, and the wealth of knowledge with you and your colleagues, I mean, can certainly.
It's the 3 or 4 people that are actually in the lab.
Yeah.
The people that are using it is a network of people, including intelligence agencies and companies and universities.
Much
and
wider breadth.
Yeah, and it's as if you took a large company and you just separated the research group.
Yeah.
There's a network of people that support it. There's a network of people that use it. There's a network of people that give feedback. But having it separated from here, that dial where I can spend more time on research instead of actually talking to people. It's an old dial that researchers suffer from. Inherent introversion is what they are.
Sometimes brilliance come out of that, though. I mean,
sometimes stupidity does too.
I always say there's a fine line between genius and insanity. It's all a matter of whether you were successful or not.
Okay, so I have the variant of that. Is how do you tell the difference between a leader and a crazy person?
Okay.
Followers.
Otherwise,
you can't tell the difference.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, we can go on to that topic. It's a whole nother podcast. But swinging that back into the SCIP environment, obviously, you know, we've got major plans for SCIP on the globalization, the heightened value proposition, reaching out into a lot of these areas around tool development like AI, reaching out into more of the executive C-suites. Backyard, so to speak. What I mean by that is really around, you know, diversification, M&A, supply chain, innovation, digital transformation, all of these types of things that people, that you're saying a lot of execs are burying their head in the sand, but have to become front and center. They're the charging rhino that you can't ignore anymore, and you have to really start putting together intelligence and strategy around this to really look at how do we be able to compete not only today but in the 1 to 3 to 5 year horizon, and be nimble enough. That's a term I like to use, the nimble organization that you can adapt and have resilience. It's another term I like to use in this context. Resiliency, I think, is the new term, not adaptation but resiliency, and I think that's a critical element in our value prop that we want to deliver. So SCIP, intelligence, futures thinking. What's your take on the whole futures and scenario planning, and the horizon planning for the next 3 to 5 years?
For SCIP or CI?
For CI, in the technology roadmap and business development space. I mean, how would you look at that from a futures perspective?
I don't have that much expertise into actually give you a good answer on that. I'm not that involved in the road mapping area. Jonathan Kaloff, I know, is really involved. He'd probably be a good person to answer that question. Going back to what Richard had mentioned earlier this morning, to me, the gap that he pointed out is one I would agree with him in there, is that early stage research, that what he called TL1s to TL4s. That's the area that the U.S. is underinvested in, and they don't know how to find them. And that's where a lot of the clients that we have, it says, how can you crack that problem?
Right.
And so I tend to more focus on the earlier stage of what's more risky and more higher return, but more risky. We become very risk averse in our research investments, not just for the military and the government,
of course,
but even for industry. And even at university settings, there's a tendency to be risk averse. How do you really get to the idea of how to be a leader as an innovator as how to just take safe bets.
Yeah, of course.
And that's the
area
I focus on.
Yeah, it's a tug of war really between being that innovative next gen type product versus the amount of risk and exposure that you're having as an organization to do that. And what do you see as being some of the differentiating signals? I mean, every company, I can list probably a dozen off the top of my head where they've had these false product introductions or product was good, but the way it was introduced, the window of opportunity was wrong, the price point, the competitive nature, on and on. What are some of the signals that you might think of in terms of when you do this sort of research? Are there any sort of early warning indicators, so to speak, that might say, hey, this is ripe for this type of environment, or the timing isn't right because of this, or the product isn't right? Do you explore any of that sort of stuff? No.
Hey, it's a good question, but
how would you, in the research you do though, I'm trying to bring this back to more of a pragmatic approach. How do you determine then what are those kinds of things that help you as a researcher have a higher propensity for outcome A versus outcome B?
Okay, so to answer that question, I'll give you a case example. When you're dealing with the very earliest research that will potentially be a product, it's too soon to be able to say where to introduce it, when to introduce it. Way too soon.
Yeah.
The question really is, how do you know what it is that is going to make a difference in the marketplace? How do you really not get blinded by what your experts tell you, especially in academia where they're all essentially trying to justify what they're doing?
Yeah.
Because part of the game is getting research, getting money to continue what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I played that game too. But then, so the real question for industry is, how do you step away from that and realize that there's this bias, and realize that you need to have an objective, non-expert-based way of evaluating what the options are.
Yeah.
Because all of our methods are 99% based on experts, and we talk at AI as a way of replacing the experts. I actually see AI as a way of giving fundamental insights that are unbiased. That's different.
It is very different.
And so that example that I gave about SmithKline early investments in GI and the kind of the AI generated solution says, you missed this point in the entire thing. The real risk is over here.
Yeah.
The real opportunity is that.
Yeah.
That is where I think some of the future is. It takes something like Frost and Sullivan to do probably 6 months to do a really good job for a report.
Right.
What if you can get 95% there in a week or a day?
Yeah.
And then vet it with experts.
Yeah.
That changes the whole nature of the world.
The entire roadmap has been accelerated to
and speed's extremely important now.
Yes.
And so that early stage is more, what do you really need to identify what makes, which of the, say there's about 15,000 areas of research that are the pre-emergent areas, pre-emergent, emergent, and mature. Most people you'll be sold the emergent, the mature area.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of advocates for it.
Of course.
Okay. You get to the emergent and then get to the pre-emergent, which is where more venture capital needs to be looking at. What does it tell you out of that 10,000? Which ones actually will take off?
Yeah.
And how do you know that they do take off?
Yeah.
And how do you know your indicators actually predict takeoffs? And what are the odds of that? That's the area that I'm interested in, not further down the line, way at the very, very beginning.
Incubation area.
And it's like any venture capitalist, they know that if they're lucky if they get 2 out of 10.
Yeah, that would be very successful.
So right now, for 6-year forecasts of exceptional growth in those pre-emergent, we're getting 5 out of 10 over 6 years. That's so far better what anyone else could do.
Yeah.
And it's getting that way of thinking more into the executive mind. But it's there already in the venture capitalists.
Right, of course. Right.
But even venture capitalists, in the times I've talked to them, they are so wedded to the expert approach. And part of that is that's the way they define the problem. That's the way they define their identity.
Yeah, well, that's how VCs eliminate the risk too, right?
Yep.
They don't want the exposure as well because it's obviously they don't want to have they want to have a winning venture in that aspect. So Excellent. This has been a very informative discussion.
Thank you.
I would love
Sorry I
to
couldn't
continue
answer
this.
some of the questions
No,
you asked.
hey, this is all more opportunities for us to do a collaboration.
Yep.
So I want to thank you, Dick, really
Sure,
very much
Richard.
so for being a part of this. Thank you for joining us at SCIP, and I definitely am serious about this. I do want to do more things collaboratively with you and your organization as we move forward, not just in telecons, but other things that we can do maybe on a project-based or whatever
Well,
we can do.
your new idea of the
Intelligence centers?
intelligence centers
Yeah.
that Jonathan is talking about.
Yeah.
There's some ideas behind that we'll talk about outline and see what we can
Absolutely.
do. Maybe we'll talk a year from now about how that plays
By
out.
that time, our intelligence centers of excellence will have 50 of them around the globe at that time.
You could do that.
I
The question is
seriously
how to
think so.
implement it, and that's some ideas I've got for you.
Excellent, excellent. All right,
We'll
Dick.
talk about it
Thank you
next
so
time.
much. All right,
Bye-bye.
thank you again. Bye-bye.